Here we go. People rolling in. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
We made it.
We made it.
Thanksgiving week too. Best
I
time for a
know this is,
webinar.
yeah. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe people want to join a webinar and sort of zone out. Andy's like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. This is just a normal
Yeah,
week.
here in Canada, it's just a normal week.
That's
I get a lot less vendor calls on Friday.
That's true. Yeah. Do they still have sales?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Canada copied the U.S. and we have a Black Friday as well.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really?
It used to be a lot of people would go across the border to go shopping, so all of the retailers here decided to do the same.
Didn't want to
That
lose
makes
that
sense.
revenue.
You got it.
Yeah. Well, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining. We have a wonderful cast here that I'm proud to welcome to our webinar, and we're representing multiple companies, and we're so happy Andy was able to join as a mutual partner here from All Care IT. So we'll get into introductions in a second, but I just wanted to set the context of what we're talking about today. We're talking about CIS controls, a map to security success. So we're going to give you the whole map. No, I'm just kidding. Basically, actually, both Sention and CyberQP have sort of championed CIS as like, hey, this is the horse that we're getting behind on what's going to be the roadmap and the standard for MSP security. And we've both done a lot of content on it. So today, we wanted to talk about like exactly what that means, where our companies fit in, how you can actually functionally start to do it. Many attendees on here probably attended our fantastic forum where we did a lot of this stuff in person.
Whoop, whoop. That was awesome.
Whoop, whoop. Yep. There we go. And yeah, so let's get into it. Let's start with introductions here. Zach, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I am one of the co-founders of Sention. And like Jimmy said, we chose our horse to be CIS, right? We're going to be behind them. We're spreading the content. And I think the big differentiator, which I'll get into for us when we do introduce the technology and a little bit about why we did this is, as an earlier stage venture, MSPs, enterprises, I mean, the businesses you talk to, they don't just have to trust, hey, this vendor's telling us this is the right thing to do. You're actually saying, hey, this vendor allows us to do what this actual respected, known, popular body is telling them to do. So I wanted to kind of comment on your horse comment. So very much all CIS, really excited to get into it and talk with you guys.
And Andy, our most qualified person here to talk about operationally adding CIS to your MSP. Can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about All Care IT?
Yeah, for sure. Hey everyone. So Andy Laren from All Care IT. So I've been in business since 1996. So I've been in the cybersecurity space for a long, long time, and unfortunately seen lots of bad stuff go down. And so I love CIS because it's very prescriptive. It's very actionable. So NIST is great as well. NIST is fantastic at a very high level. If you're talking to a C-suite, they can kind of understand where things fit in NIST, but it's not actionable. You can't take what is inside of NIST and do something with it, whereas CIS you can. And so that's why we like pairing the two of them together. And CIS shows us what we need to do and how we do it. Then we can map some tools to it, which is what we're going to get into today.
Yeah, no, phenomenally said. CIS has great mappings to NIST, and many people come to us. Oh, do you do this? Do you do that? Do you do that? Do you do blah blah blah? And I go, well, here's our CIS mappings, and then here's a link to the website which shows you the mappings to everywhere else. Anyway, my name is Jimmy Hatzel. I'm the VP of Revenue at CyberQP, and just happy to be on with such wonderful folks here.
I think at this point we all know you, Jimmy. You're quite famous in the LinkedIn world and speaking lately. It's awesome to see the content you're producing.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate
Definitely.
it. Appreciate it, Zach. But why don't you set the tone for us here, Zach? This is like, I hear you talking about this stuff and I hear passion. So we need to emulate some of that to kick us off here.
Absolutely passionate. I mean, like I was saying in my introduction, the biggest reason, Sention went with CIS is because they are that standard. They are, I guess, the primary image or baseline or goals that every MSP could have and compare themselves to. So I guess I just listed out a definition and the purpose, but CIS has been around, I believe, for about 30 years. They've really been growing just over the last decade. And I know with my weekly webinar with CIS and Rich, they are actually prioritizing MSP offerings now to make it a little bit more feasible. And I mean, we see that with CyberQP, attending their shows. So it's really exciting. And I know they have, it's like a community driven nonprofit as well. So anyone can contribute, you can get recognized, and it makes all of their content available and free. So the big thing on this, we were talking about NIST, depending who you're talking to, they may care about CIS, they may not care about CIS. And Andy, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, but if you're talking to a healthcare environment, a medical practice, they may not want to hear about CIS. They may not care about, hey, I'm doing this to meet this control. That won't make sense. But where it does click is saying, hey, I'm doing this to meet that control, which relates to this HIPAA requirement, right? And I guess handing the ball back off to Andy, do you have conversations like that? Kind of incorporating CIS and their cross mappings? Is that part of your process?
It is at times, not with everybody, of course, but I think it was Eric Woodard that talked about this, where he says, it doesn't have to be our MSP or a competitor that comes up and says these are the reasons why we do certain things. You've got a standard body that you can point to, and they're a standard body that is fairly recognizable. Even the name of it, Center for Internet Security, is fantastic to talk about. So and the other thing that I do like to talk about with CIS is how up to date it is. Now, of course, NIST just came out with their new version, but NIST for a long time, it falls behind because it is really government backed, and it's really enterprise and everybody underneath. Whereas CIS really is aimed at a lot of the things that we're doing. And I love the maturity level of CIS, right? You've got the 3 different sets of controls depending on the size of the organization. So as an organization grows, they can bump up in their maturity level.
I think Andy just saw NIST and saw the national part of it, and he's like, what nation? What nation are we talking about here?
No, I mean, that's the great thing too with NIST is that, it's recognized around the world. But and it's great, again, from sort of a 10,000 foot view. I love NIST because it's fairly easy to understand. They're left a boom, right a boom, and using that as, hey, we can spend less on this side over here. Whereas if you get over onto this side, after the boom, it takes a lot more people, it takes a lot more dollars to fix the problem. So let's stay left of boom with processes and with technology and with people, but less on the people side.
How long ago did you start the process of tracking controls and aligning yourself?
So it was about 3 years ago that we sort of started along this journey, and it really is a journey. It's not an overnight thing. It's actually fairly difficult at times to try and get some of the vendors out there to let us know where they align on CIS. Most of them, Matt Lee will laugh if I talk about this because he has that same problem of trying to talk to vendors and finding out where they align on CIS. And most of the large vendors don't even understand where that would be. They'll talk about their SOC 2 compliance or where it is on NIST, but when it comes to CIS, they don't quite often get down into the nitty gritty. And so there are a few partners out there that do that sort of thing, like CyberQP and like Sention, where they say these are the spots that we help you align to, and that's awesome. And I know that Matt Lee is putting together something very similar to what I have to show all of the different tools and which tools you can use to help you align to some of these controls.
Yeah, and one thing you really mentioned was that left of boom, Andy. Left of boom and right of boom. I do get asked all the time, hey, I'm looking to meet NIST. I'm not doing as much CIS. And, inherently it's almost the same thing, right? CIS cross maps, there's crosswalks. You're the same. The goal is the same.
Yeah.
But one thing I really wanted to point out, and feel free to talk towards this, is CIS is prescriptive, like you said. So they are broken up into a series of things. We all know the CIS controls, which we'll talk about today. You hinted at the different groups. So implementation groups, they recommend everyone does IG1 and then IG2 and 3 for more mature. One area that I don't always hear people talk about are the levels of the CIS benchmarks. And I know Jimmy and I, during our webinar episode the other week, we were talking about the lapse configurations. You know, these levels, L1, L2, and next generation also feed into implementation groups, which feed into controls. So I guess just kind of outlining the CIS and NIST, CIS goes way granular and can really create that roadmap for MSPs to get all the foundational stuff done. And then maybe they start escalating that conversation to the NIST aspects. Would you kind of agree with that? Is there anything else you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And you know, like I was saying, this really is a journey because um, we found that as you're going through it, some of the different controls are very difficult to find a tool or to find a process in order to do properly. You can kind of sort of do it, but it becomes very difficult, especially in the MSP space where you're having to do it across, you know, 100 different clients and having multi-tenant tools.
Yep.
You know, some of the tools out there are enterprise grade tools, and that's great if you're, you know, an IT shop just for one client, but makes it very difficult when you're trying to do that on scale. And so I love when some of the vendors, some of the partners out there say, hey, this is how we're going to help you to achieve this level of control.
Yeah.
So just on why MSPs need it, like I heard from you in the beginning, one, it gives me a way to standardize my own security practice. Two, it gives me context to talk with security vendors and technology vendors and see exactly where they fit in and actually, I mean, visualize overlap and things like that. But three, and we're definitely going to cover this later too, is you know, at least some standard and cover of liability where you can point to it and say, like, look, it's not just me just like, hey, I think you need MFA. It's literally this widely accepted and agreed upon standard that I'm following here. And anything else to add on sort of, you know, why you think MSP use CIS?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely covers your behind. I think, Jimmy, you were talking about it in one of the previous webinars where, you know, like if you look at accounting and how accountants, you know, if they follow a particular standard, then they can point to that standard and say, hey, we were following this standard and this is why these are the way that they are. So the same sort of thing with, you know, whether it's CIS or NIST or HIPAA or whatever it happens to be, if you can point to a standard and you can say, this is the standard that I was following, and these are the reasons why we did these things, and these are the reasons why we accepted the risk on this particular control set. It's, you know, you can accept risk on things. We all
Yep.
accept risk in our daily lives, right? Like we get in our cars and we accept risk of driving.
Yep.
So you can accept the risk, but you have to document that you're accepting that risk on that particular control. Otherwise, when you get audited, it looks like you were just inept and you didn't know about that certain thing. So yeah, the standards are fantastic to be able to point to something. And again, I really like CIS because it doesn't matter which industry it happens to be. CIS fits in everything. Now, of course, you know, there are certain other, you know, CMMC and HIPAA and all these other different standards, and they all fit within CIS as well. And so that's, again, why I really like pointing to CIS.
Great.
Now, I'm curious, you mentioned, obviously, Jimmy and I, we're here as vendors, right? We're talking towards CIS, you know, making awareness. But you mentioned when you talk to other vendors, they may not always have an answer or they'll respond incorrectly. Has this elevated your has following CIS in the last 3 years elevated your conversation with vendors to ask maybe more mature questions, weed out some vendors a little bit easier if they can't talk towards this? I mean, how important is CIS in your vendor conversations?
It very much is. So you know, when they don't understand CIS, and you know, CIS has been around for a little while. It's not like it's something that just came up last year. It definitely makes me scratch my head and wonder about that particular company. Like, if they're, let's say, doing DNS filtering, they should know where they fit inside of CIS controls on that particular type of tool. And so if there's two vendors and one of them puts that out there very easily and says, hey, here's where we help you align, and another vendor says nothing about it, or even worse, when you ask them about it, they scratch their head and they say, we don't even know what that is. It definitely makes me lean more toward the one that knows what they're talking about with it. In any relationship, this is, what I think my clients look for with us is we look for a partnership. We don't want just that vendor relationship. And so, if that particular vendor that I'm working with, if they help me out in everything that we do, if they help us to, have a go-to-market strategy with whatever it happens to be, if they help us out with some of these types of things, like where they align on CIS, that definitely strengthens the relationship.
And I'm curious, I guess MSPs needing CIS from that vendor perspective is awesome, but even an MSP perspective of needing it, is this giving you a unique competitive advantage against other MSPs? Is this going to drive more revenue for you by following CIS?
It does, because it definitely helps out in our maturity. It helps out in lots of different areas, like the slide that's up on the screen. When it comes to liability, that becomes a much bigger thing that we can point to. Again, I think it was Eric Woodard that talked about this, that, a lot of MSPs, it's kind of like throwing darts at a board. They're like, ooh, new shiny, and let's go for that. If it doesn't help you to strengthen that cybersecurity framework, then what's the point of bringing on that new tool? And it may not be a tool that is required. A lot of the things inside of CIS are processes, and so it may not be, going to grab a tool to do it. It may be, hey, let's design this process, and this is what we always have to do. And so, all of these these 7 different things that are on the screen definitely help out in differentiating us versus our competitor. We look like a much bigger, much stronger MSP because of these.
How do you approach implementing CIS controls in your customers? Like, do you look at it in 2 sets with internally, we're going to align, to IG3, and, our customers, we're going to start and, move up? And is it case by case, or do you have a set standard across your whole base? Everyone aligns to these, and when we put in a new tool, it goes to everyone. I'm just curious, because I hear pushback on, well, I have to sell my customers these things if I want to get them aligned to these standards.
Yeah, that's a tough one for us. I mean, we're still working on a lot of the items in IG3 ourselves. So, when it comes to our customers, a lot of the packages that we put together are already somewhat aligning to IG1 and parts of IG2. Now, again, I keep pointing to Eric Woodard. He's kind of a pioneer in this. The
ghost of Eric is on this webinar right now.
Yeah,
his presence is known.
Where he even calls one of his packages IG1, right? And so he's pointing and aligning to it and saying, this is the standard. Hey, when you need to go to IG2, then we've got a different package for that. I think that's brilliant, and we haven't gotten there yet to saying, here's our IG1 and here's our IG2 package. A lot of the times it's somewhat driven by the clients. They've got, certain compliances that they have to adhere to, or they're in a certain type of industry and they have to align to a certain compliance there. Or they've got cyber insurance, and cyber insurance is saying these are the things that you need to do. And so then when we say they need to do it, they ask about what the price is, but when cyber insurance says you have to do it, they're like, well, we have to do it. So this is kind of a maturing process, and we're definitely not perfect on it. It's been a journey, and it's been a lot of learning. And I really love when our partners have these types of things, because it helps us to learn from it. Some of the different webinars in the past and in-person sessions have been amazing at, learning more and more about CIS and it becoming just part of our, regular vocabulary.
Yeah. I think vendors should have been also invited to this call to attend. I feel like they'd walk away with some things.
Well, let's talk about like the alignment.
Mhm.
I think we have a slide too showing, um, like so like if you
Mhm.
look at your website and you look at our website, we'll have like, we help with these controls, right? Like the 18 control groupings. But then inside of that, there's like so many underneath,
Yep.
right? And then it's like, it's very granular where each different part fits in. So I think people don't even understand that. Well, it's like, okay, well, I already have Sention for 2. I don't need anything else. When like really you need like, 10 processes, 20, like, 2 other tools, change, a group policy for 15
Uh-huh.
Microsoft things, like in order to meet that. And I don't know, maybe you do all of 2. I actually don't know that. But
No, there's no single solution for CIS. Title of the slide, Jimmy. Like,
I
I
didn't
mean,
even notice that.
that's the whole point of what we want to get at here, right? And we'll segue. I think Andy should share his screen here in a moment, but this is the
Yeah.
biggest thing, right? I think the biggest thing from my point of view why vendors need to do this for MSPs is so that they can identify their gaps. So just kind of explaining the screen we're looking at here. CyberQP and Sention, we both made a CIS cross mapping document, and we'll share those in the follow-up email after the show. But ultimately, we identified everywhere that we play a part within the 18 controls, and these are highlighted on the screen. So the blue ones here are just Sention, the orange ones are just both of us, and then the green one is just QP. And you can see just by having our 2 solutions, which are robust, focus on CIS, we only cover about 45 safeguards. 45 out of 153. That's not even half, right? So to think some conversations I go in, they're like, hey, now I'm 100% CIS V8. Absolutely not. We do map to, for example, control 2, inventory control and control of software assets. If you know Sention, we're hardening GPOs. We're not actually helping with your software inventory, right? That's not what we're doing. But there are about a handful of these CIS benchmarks, these GPOs, that do help control those software assets. So because we touch a few GPOs that have this cross map, we cover it partially. But you should always have additional vendors, more specialized, or add pieces to that puzzle to complete that control, right? There's no single solution. So really wanted to emphasize that on this slide. I really like it.
So Andy, how do you track that? Because there's a million different solutions that you use and a million different processes.
Yeah.
This might be the most intense share screen, but I think it'll be well worth it.
All right.
And if you
So
can give it a zoom, Andy, that would also be helpful.
sure. So this, well, I'll zoom in a second, I guess. So what we did is we took, so there's a website, Audit Scripts, where they have an Excel document about all of the different controls. And so what we did was we took all of that and we put it onto one page, and then we've got each of the individual controls as well if we want to zoom in on the controls. But I'll just show you this one on the all list. We've mapped them all to IG1, IG2, and IG3. So as you see, just in CIS Control 1, there are 5 different safeguards within it. So 2 of them are in IG1, 4 of them are in IG2, and then 5 of them are in IG3. And then we've also mapped them to what the NIST standard is. So, identity, respond, detect, identify, and we tried to color code them to the same as what NIST has. And then we also put down what the asset types are down here at the side. So these all have to do with devices, whereas, in Control 2, they're all to do with applications. So this is sort of the starting ground. Then we took the, the explanation of what each one of these is and put them over here at the side. Now, what I've done up here is I've, all of the different tools that we use, I just shrunk them here because everybody's going to have a different tool stack. But basically, where those particular tools help us align on the CIS controls. And so we've gone down through very exhaustively. with all of the different controls and where certain tools will help us. And this is not an easy task. And in some cases, we've had to go to vendors and really probe with them and say, how do you help me with this? I think that this is how you help me. This is what I see from my perspective. But I'm not sure. Can you help me to figure out where the alignment is? So, and in the spreadsheet, we can move things around, of course, and zoom in on things, but this is the essential quick way of doing it. Every one of these is a clickable link. So anybody on my team can click on it and find out more about what that particular tool happens to be. But this is a lot of work to go through all of this and get these things aligned. And again, I know Matt Lee from PAX 8 has been really trying to do that with a lot of the tools that they use. And it's an exhaustive list. Eventually, we'll probably take all of this and build it into an application so that we see it. But to start out, I started this a couple of years ago and sort of been adding to it constantly. And this is what works for us at the moment.
And now, Andy, so if there's no mapping tool, you basically just have to go through documentation and, product brochures and sort of guess.
Basically, or, in some cases, ask the vendors, how do you help me with this? So, both of your companies, so CyberQP and Sention, both have published documents on how to do this and where they happen to line up. And so, this first column is Sention and the second one is CyberQP, from what I remember. Yeah. So, on both of those, we can see where there's alignment and where there is crossover, as both of you showed on your slides. There definitely is some crossover on the control itself. But when you drill in and you see each of the little individual safeguards, on some things there is no crossover. Like on 6, there's CyberQP does it, but Sention does not. Whereas up in here, both of them do that, and that's okay that both of them do it. We've got definitely more alignment on that, and that's okay. I'm okay with several tools doing similar types of things on top of each other, because some of them it'll be with MFA, and so there will be some crossover on some of these things.
And that's one thing I really want to hammer in on. If you can elaborate a little further, because I think when you were showing the top of this, I think control 2.3, you had 4 yeses in the column, right? So a couple questions on this. There is no single solution. It's okay to have multiple vendors helping meet the same control. But one thing I am noticing here as well, you don't have any partials. This is just a yes/no list. Is that because it doesn't matter how much they're doing? It's just a matter of yes or no, and then you're going to stack on top of it anyway?
No, we do have it in the partials when we drill into the actual control inside of here. I'm not going to show you that because I've got some of the things inside of there would be with certain clients as well. But we do, and some of these controls are for workstations versus servers. And so you definitely have to segment that out as well. So that's why it is a lot of work to do all of this. But as you're doing it, you're really thinking about, why is this control here? What does it help prevent? What does it help safeguard? And again, Eric has talked about this before, where he's got a friend that had a much larger MSP, but they had a breach at one of their clients, and he helped them kind of work through it and say, well, if you had been using this particular safeguard, let's look at where that would stop things, or let's look at why these guys keep getting back in because you're not doing this particular thing. So it really starts to help you line up your thinking on these things, because cybersecurity isn't just one tool. It's not 10 tools. It's a number of tools and a number of processes.
So Zach, why don't we go and you can sort of walk us through how you provide the mappings, for Sention. I can show a little bit on CyberQP too. And I think our attendees can, get a good idea of like how to walk through, like that spreadsheet is like where, say you're doing nothing right now, you want to get to that spreadsheet, right? First, you got to look at all your vendors and sort of figure out where they're from, like where they fit in, things they help with. Yeah, and honestly, you can just take some of the resources that we've created, Sention and CyberQP, and just send it. Like, I'm looking for this exactly. Like, can you send me this exactly?
I hear that. And we're fortunate. Sention is built based off of CIS. So our cross mappings is a little more unique because we are not making assumptions about what we cross map to. We are CIS told us we cross map to that. We didn't say that. CIS told us. So we're very fortunate in that respect. And I know I didn't give too much of an introduction to Sention going into this. Obviously, want to keep this focused on educational around CIS. But for context, what Sention does is endpoint and by end of year, hopefully even browser hardening to the CIS benchmarks. So when I keep saying CIS benchmarks throughout this entire webinar, it's about between Windows workstations, servers, and browsers, it's about 900 different GPO recommendations. So that's what our solution is implementing for you, right? So we're making it so you can do this efficiently, so you don't have to read about 3,000 pages of a PDF. If you saw me at Fantastic Forum, I may have dropped a large box on stage to represent that. And then provide the reporting on this. And Andy, I actually want to pause and talk about reporting. So CIS, obviously, we're doing the mappings. We have our internal Excel sheets, everything you need to do. But how do these vendors possibly help you in proving that they're doing it? How important is reporting when you talk to vendors?
It's really important, because, you know, you need to, if there is an audit with an auditor, that's one thing. But even just, you know, every quarter or every year, looking to see where there happens to be drift, because there will be drift. Updates happen, you know, just with Windows updates, it'll shut things off or turn things back on that should have been off or should have been on. And so you've got to look at that drift. So, you know, just when it comes to Sention, we used to do a lot of these things with a bunch of PowerShell scripts that we had in our RMM, things that, you know, like Eric has there on the screen inside of Intune or group policy. And one of our guys, when we, you know, started looking at Sention and I was telling him about it, he was lamenting, you know, the hundreds of hours that he's had to put into group policies at various different clients to do some of the things that Sention does. And Sention, of course, does a whole lot more than what we were just doing inside of group policies. And the problem with group policies is that they break, they may not push out. You've got to check them. It's not there's, you know, no easy way to do that. You've got to, you know, do a lot of manual processes. Whereas within Sention, for instance, you can see where your baseline was and then where you should be. And then if there's any drift that happens, you'll see those drifts. You'll see it battling, you know, something that's trying to change it, whether it's Windows updates or, you know, group policy that's beating it up or something else that's changing it. And therefore you can prove to an auditor, here's where things were, here's where things are now. We can show over the last 6 months. So, you know, if you're doing that with group policy, that's near impossible to do. If you're doing it with RMM, that's near impossible to do. I mean, you could try and output the logs, but that would be horrible.
GP edit script, it's disgusting.
Yeah. So, you know, being able to print out a report and say, this is where we are for the last 6 months. Yes, there was some drift and these things got corrected. Or, you know, we accepted the risk on one particular thing. And here we documented why we accepted the risk. We needed such and such a tool to work. And if we turn this off, then that tool doesn't work. And that's a critical part of the business, but you document that. So then you've got something that you can point to and you can say, yeah, it was an acceptable risk within our organization. So love that.
Appreciate that. And to take this a little bit higher level too, bringing it back to the controls, one of the most common things that I see when onboarding new MSPs, you know, you guys are testing a lot of technologies. There's sometimes I'll be told, yeah, I'm the 6th new product just being tested this month. And it's like, all right, you guys obviously get blasted with the new widgets more than anyone else because that's so many technologies to be testing at the same time. But one of the interesting things is, you know, when we onboard, we identify certain GPOs that have been changed, right? What I'm noticing, and I'm curious how this is evolved for you in your what 30 years? You said 96, almost 30 years, Andy.
Make me feel old.
What I'm curious about is when you have all these new innovative technologies that you're testing and different CIS recommendations get changed, do you know that they change after you decide I'm not moving forward with this technology? Do you always remember to change it back to the hardened state? How do MSPs manage all this testing and GPO changes and control changes?
If you document it well, that's the way that you know that you did it. But then you've got to go back to that documentation and then reverse it. And so that becomes very difficult. It becomes either a memory thing, or one person in the organization changes it and nobody else knows about it because it wasn't documented, it wasn't put anywhere. So yeah, those things become very difficult. Now, of course, there are tools that will monitor those sorts of things if you've got those tools in place. But if you don't, those are the reasons that unfortunately, when the bad guys come around, they may poke a hole, and that hole is porous, and they get into an organization. So proving compliancy is very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Having proper reporting helps you to prove those things.
Awesome. And yeah, we do have the ghost of Eric Woodard on the
Yeah, I was gonna
slide.
say
So
that he
he
made the
made
deck
it.
too.
Yeah.
No matter what, he was going to be talked about in this webinar. So we gave you a little preempt to it. But Jimmy, I want to bring this back to you because I
Sure.
kind of shared how Sention, we did this because it helped us gain rapport. We were early stage, but CyberQP kind of already had a brand name and then started mapping to CIS a little bit later in the company life cycle. What drove you guys to really prioritize CIS from that perspective? Was it MSP demand, a new marketing scheme? What was the drive?
Oh, I mean, I pretty early on this year, it was pretty obvious to me that CIS was going to be had the best shot at a standard in the MSP industry. And so, we developed a lot of our content, security, and product around that. We made conscious decisions as a company from the top levels. Whereas when we go to design a new product, we think about what controls it can help meet, where are gaps in the MSP tech stack. And then in marketing, can we do webinars like this? Can we talk about things, our fantastic forum events? But also security. We have Brian Milbier, our VP of information security. He does our product mappings. We have a couple of them, and CIS was really the first one that we did. And like a lot of it too came from PAM. We're in PAM, privileged access management, and then maybe there's like maybe 3 to 5 vendors really in with MSPs who are all doing different things, different areas of privileged access management, but we're all PAM, right? And then as an MSP, you think, well, do I already have a PAM? Do I need a PAM? Do I need blah, 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 blah? And like, it's really hard to tell from just the marketing speak what is different from these companies.
Yeah.
And I could talk all day. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, I went through that.
Big time.
I love it because you're talking same almost the same type of answer as Andy prioritizing this as an MSP, right? It differentiates us as vendors. So I love that you tied that into your response, Jimmy.
Yeah, it's and basically the areas that we help with at a high level are all the password requirements for admin accounts. There's lots of CIS stuff, needs to be 14 characters or 16 characters if you don't have MFA, like all that kind of stuff. Discovery and inventory of accounts, we help with that across different platforms. Anything on shared accounts, not using shared accounts, using named accounts, centralized account management, basically being able to disable end users or manage your admin accounts. And then, a lot of the monitoring stuff, being able to turn accounts off and on. So we're in a lot of different areas, but mostly around 5. And yeah, I mean, it's important stuff, your admin accounts, right?
I feel like you guys adding CIS to an already established brand just makes you guys even more trustworthy. I mean, it's so smart. I think it's really valuable and helps MSPs again identify their gaps and know where you compare to the other solutions on the market. So I love that you guys really did that and are prioritizing it today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Help you, do what you do and do it really well. By adhering to those standards, you can say, this is how we help you do this. It isn't just this cool fancy widget that, sounds good.
Yeah, and you can go to anyone. I think I'm spoiling Jared's slides here, but anyone can go to trust.cyberqp.com. Let me make sure I'm saying that right. Trust.cyberqp.com. Yep. And you have all the different controls that we map to, and you can request our penetration tests, who our sub-processors are. If you go to resources, you'll see some overview stuff. And then the product mappings are actually directly on our website as well. But it is really important to have something like this. And this is new for us. It took us a while to sort of get it up in this capacity. And it was also a little bit of a demand because so many MSPs were requesting our SOC 2 letters or security documents, things like that. I guess I could share my screen and sort of show what I'm talking about, since I'm just going rogue here. I tend to do that. You guys
the best webinars, man.
Yeah. This is our trust center, trust.cyberqp.com. Anyone can go to it. You'll see different compliance standards that we meet. Just because you don't see it here doesn't mean that we can't help comply. Our product can't help comply, but these are the things that we follow internally. You can go through our different controls, and these are in real time with our organization. So we have to do these things. It's literally up on our website. like if we turn MFA off, that will go away on our website. But you can request our SOC 2 type 2 letter, pen test summary, and then our security overview document. Basically, you just fill this out, and then it goes to our security team, and we'll have a NDA sent over. Resources, you go through all the controls, things. Basically, this is a lot of the stuff that is in the CIS document and how we manage it. But yeah,
and
so
I think that's great that you've done that. The transparency behind all of that is fantastic. So even something as easy as the FAQ on, yes, you have access to privileged passwords, but does CyberQP have the ability to use any of those passwords to log in and into any of the tenants? And you answer that question. So that's awesome, because you put a tremendous amount of trust in your partners, and you want to be able to see this sort of thing, see how transparent it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you kind of just talked towards it, but what does that mean to you as an MSP when you're evaluating vendors?
Transparency is huge. I mean, our clients look for transparency with us. And I talk to clients about that it's funny, we get prospects sometimes that say they don't trust their MSP, but they've been stuck with them for a while, and so they're going to continue. And to me, that's crazy. I say, like, if you don't trust your cleaner, you're going to get rid of them. Your MSP has a lot more access than your cleaner does. So if you don't trust them, get rid of them. So, that relationship has to be there, that trust and integrity. So, we put a tremendous amount of trust and integrity in our upstream providers. So all of our partners, because, if they get compromised, it's going to flow downstream to us and then downstream to our clients. So reputation damage becomes a big thing. So we don't just play with all of the new shiny tools just to try them out. And when we do, we put them on separate machines that are not part of the network, and we test things out. We monitor what it's actually doing before we actually start to implement it inside of our own domain.
Well, I commend you, Andy, because you're really ahead of the curve. I think the MSP industry as a whole, 3 years from now, this will be sort of like almost a standard, and everybody will be you get up and you talk in conversations and you say, all right, where do you fit in to vendors, and a lot more mapping, and maybe there's some regulations that have to happen for that to take place. I don't know, right? Like maybe cyber insurance is like, hey, if you're not meeting this many CIS controls, then we're not covering you or something like that. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I just see that as the direction of the industry. Yeah. So big kudos and props to you to be, you started working on it 3
We're
years
still
ago.
on the journey.
Yeah,
We're still
still
on
in
the
the
journey.
journey.
Yeah, still learning every day.
And that's it. That's a thing that I like to remind people all the time. Like, this may seem daunting as a task, and you don't need to comply with, meet all the demands of IG3 like tomorrow, right? Like start somewhere, figure out what is going on. You can't know your risk if you don't put it on a spreadsheet or on paper and look at it. And then, set a plan, and maybe in, 2-3 years, you can comply with 1/5 of all the controls.
That's actually really interesting.
Good start.
David in the chat said that they've seen cyber insurance companies giving discounts for being IG1 or higher compliant. I have not yet. I haven't seen that yet on an insurance form, and I've helped lots of clients fill them out. That's really interesting. I'd be curious to see which insurance company did that. That's really, really interesting. I think more and more of that is going to happen. And like the maturity of the whole CIS controls, like pen testing is sexy. It's it's a buzzword that gets thrown around, but it's not even in IG1. Pen testing starts in IG2 and IG3. So there's no point in doing pen testing until you've got all of that low-hanging fruit done, because guess what? You're going to fail the pen test. It will fail if you're not doing IG1. So again, when you're looking at that maturity side of things, it really helps to follow CIS.
It's so funny. Like, even back in 2018, when I was at Scout and we were doing MSSP stuff, people would be like, I need a pen test. And we'd be like, all right, I'll sell you a pen test, but it's going to cost $75,000. And we could actually start with a CIS assessment and figure out what I could already tell you without needing to hack into your network. Like, I can just ask you these questions because you're going to need to get that at the end anyway. And people will be like, oh, okay. But the pen test sounds cool, right?
Yeah, they want a pen test and they don't have MFA turned on.
Yeah.
And David, I don't know if you realize it, but your comment, we're going to have to dive into that. David is our next week's guest on our own webinar series with CIS next week. So we will be getting into that.
Awesome.
That's great.
Look forward to hearing that.
Well, we'll send out the recording of this if you missed any of it. We'll send out the CIS resources, Trust Center, all that. And if we don't send it out, it is 100% Jared's fault. He is the man responsible for doing all of that. Tune into Sention's webinars weekly. Weekly, is it?
Yeah, we do it weekly, man. There's so many recommendations. I think it's turned into a 48-week episode or weekly series because there's so many dang recommendations.
That's commitment, man.
Andy's been on once, you've been on once. I mean,
Yeah.
it's exciting, but it is ridiculously hard to keep up with the PowerPoints.
Connect with Andy on LinkedIn. He there you go. People are already chasing you down for that spreadsheet. You can charge accordingly for it.
Separate business model right there.
What was the website that you downloaded the original from?
Audit Scripts. I think it's
so
auditscripts.com.
Yep. I know we actually use that when we were creating our tool too. So Audit Scripts, very, very good to get a starting point with.
There you go. Put that in the chat. Well, yeah, it's been great. Appreciate everyone's time.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks all. This was
Yeah.
fun. Take care. Bye, guys.